Hey there, and welcome to the Dynamics Hot Dish Podcast, serving up stories and knowledge on Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. This is What's Hot in Dynamics. You're now joining Merlin Schweiger, Liz McGlennon, and Ashley Steiner. A friend of mine the other day sent an email. It was actually a while ago, so I'm ready with my list. But talking about top 5 movies. And so I have my top 5 movies of all time. I put a lot of thought into this. And so now I'm going to put the two of you on the spot and find out what your top 5 movies are. Who wants to go first? Liz wants to go first.
Yeah,
I can see it.
have Liz. Fine. So I kind of thought it by category. So my favorite sappy chick flick movie is The Notebook. My most watched movie of all time is Pirates of the Caribbean because I liked it when I was younger, not recently.
Sure.
I know Mel Gibson's kind of an asshole, but I really like Braveheart. And it's a really close tie to The Patriot, so I was kind of debating, but Braveheart's better. And then for my funny movies, I'd pick Bridesmaids and The Hangover.
All right. Good choices, good selections. I like your methodology. Ashley?
So I don't know if I can come up with 5 right off the top of my head because I watch a lot of movies. And when I say a lot of movies, I watch a ton of movies. I can say that my favorite movie of all time is Notting Hill, which I could watch that movie anytime, any day. It was actually in a theater recently for Valentine's Day, for people to go watch. And I'm like, who's going to theaters? But that would sound amazing to watch it in the theater. I also really like Dark Knight Rises. I'm a huge Batman fan. I also really like Christian Bale.
Good one.
And if you've never seen him in Newsies from the early 90s, you gotta watch Newsies. And I would say to kind of finish with a funny one, I really love Wedding Crashers. It was my first rated R movie that I saw in theaters when I turned 17. And it stuck with me. It never gets old.
It is a solid flick.
Yeah, I don't know if I thought about this for maybe 5 more hours, I could come up with a really good list, but.
That's fair. I mean, realistically with this email thread, my friends and I took weeks to come up with a good list. So my number 1 movie, hands down, no questions, The Big Lebowski. Mm-hmm. Definitely best movie ever made. Ashley, don't say anything otherwise.
I've never seen it, Merlin.
What? Oh, Ashley.
No wonder why you didn't know what our photos were from for the trivia night.
No, I had no idea.
Yeah.
All right. Well, you need to rectify that. Okay. And then in kind of no real particular order after that, the Matrix, but really only the first one, the rest of the trilogy stuff. The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, which is an exceptional Western, but it's really long. Good soundtrack, though.
I've never heard of that.
It's a Clint Eastwood spaghetti Western.
So Maureen, you've got 2 more to list things I've never seen.
Fantasia.
Me too. I hate that one.
Wow.
It's so cool.
It was so boring as a kid to watch.
It scared me. I don't remember what
it's
part
weird.
Of it. Yeah.
You should try it again as an adult, Liz.
I know. I've not watched it since I was a child.
Number 5, Inception.
Oh yeah, that's a good one.
I really enjoy Inception.
It's a great movie. Have you seen the new movie that Christopher Nolan did? Isn't that it's Christopher Nolan, right? Tenet? It's kind
I
of
haven't seen it
yet.
Yeah. I'm dying to see it.
I've heard it's good.
I've heard both that it's good and that it's not good.
I like the movies that that he does, even Dunkirk. It's all in different time frames and you have to put it together. You can't just enjoy the movie. You're enjoying the movie, but you're also creating it for yourself. I love his movies. He did obviously The Dark Knight Rises too. So
yeah, it's true. Yes, he's made lots of good movies. I agree. All right. Now that we've got that settled, our topic for today is the XrmToolBox, which, admittedly, I used for the first time this week, for the first time in probably 5 years or so.
Was it in preparation for this?
It was not. It was actually in preparation for something else, but I needed an OData query and didn't know that off the top of my head, and conveniently there's a tool for that. But I know there's lots of good stuff in the XrmToolBox, and I know that you guys have lots of thoughts and feelings about it. So who would like to go first on what you love about the XRM Toolbox?
Well, why don't we talk about the one you brought up, Merlin, first?
Okay.
Well, I'm going to
Seems
take a page
reasonable.
out of Liz's book and say, should we tell people what the XRM Toolbox is? Or do we
Yes.
assume that they
Tell
already know?
people.
Yes, good point. Ashley,
Certainly they
explain
already
it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's so funny because it actually, this is one of those things where people like talk about at conferences or in sessions or like among each other, and they're like, oh, just go into the XRM Toolbox. And I have to say, for the first, I don't know, 5 years into my CRM career, had no idea what they're talking about. So that's why I'm like, maybe we should pause and tell people what it is.
Ashley, why didn't you just
Okay.
ask me what it was?
You know, Liz, there were dark periods in our relationship. Just kidding. So yeah, the XrmToolBox Toolbox is like an add-on. How I would describe it, I guess you guys can disagree. It's an add-on tool that is full of just different development tools built by some really smart people, way smarter than me, that allow you to make changes to your CRM environment or Dynamics environment in multiple different ways. So it's kind of like an overlay tool on top of it that allows you to just make mass changes or different changes or changes that you can't make in this system, things like that. But it's just a bunch of different plugins part of this toolbox.
I'll add to it. I think it's awesome that it's free and it's like all community, like volunteer built stuff, which is awesome. It's also really easy to download and install. So like, don't be afraid of installing it. It's basically like a zip file.
I was gonna say, it doesn't even have an installer. It's just like you
yeah,
unzip it.
You download it. Yeah, it's really easy to get going with. And then like, I guess I like to explain it. It's all the stuff you wish you could do as an admin in the system that you can't do out of the box is pretty much in the XRM Toolbox. Like you have all these extra powers that you wouldn't otherwise have, especially if you're not a developer. So it gives that power to non-developer system admins or people that are trying to do configuration work.
I will say that connecting it to your environments can sometimes be difficult. I don't know if you guys are like, oh my gosh, Ashley, that's so easy. But like I went down this whirlwind because my production environment yesterday when I went to use it, like was unconnected. And so I had to reconnect. And like I kept getting this error message. And so I got into this like 4-hour tunnel, I'm exaggerating, of like trying to change the time zone on my computer and with the server. And I was just using the wrong way to log in.
It should be really easy to connect if you're online. I've seen challenges with on-prem orgs, especially I want to say for not like IFD, but I haven't had to work with a non-internet facing deployment on-prem org for a long time. But online should be really easy to connect.
I guess that's the moral of the story, is that if you're finding it difficult, you're doing it wrong.
It's basically like your URL, your regular username, and your regular password. Like basically your Active Directory credentials is all you need if you're clicking the right settings.
6 options of like how to log in, and I literally did all the ones except for the one I needed.
You need to pick the right option.
Right.
So yeah, if you're that stuck and you're online, ask for help because it shouldn't be that hard.
I was determined to figure it out.
Sounds like you did, so you succeeded. I had a similar problem my own self. We've got multi-factor authentication turned on. And so like I had to use the like API key method. And then I was like, but wait, where do I get this key? And then the instructions were just like, you can just click this button and put in the default and then it'll work. We suggest that you set up something else. I was like, oh, I clicked the button and it worked fine. So
I've had an issue with connecting through it if there's like a redirect login page. Like I had a client that bought his licenses through like his Office and D365 licenses through GoDaddy. And like GoDaddy gives you like a different admin center and like redirects you when you sign in. And I didn't spend very much time. Like I just went about it a different way, but I never got it to work with like that GoDaddy type redirect account. So like I could see that being an issue too for an online org.
I've never heard of that.
Don't ever buy your licenses that way. Like he wanted to undo it and I'm like, I think you need to contact Microsoft. Like I don't know how to get you out of this situation. Like the whole admin center experience is different, but that's a topic for a different podcast.
that seems weird. Let's redirect back to the coolness of the XRM Toolbox. So the tool that I used to springboard into that was the Fetch XML Builder, which will essentially gives you a little interface where you kind of build your kind of advanced find, You can add filters and conditions and whatever else you want, and then it'll build out your whole fetch XML query. But you can also say, show me this query in OData, or show me this query in older OData, or show me this query in, I don't even remember what the other choices were. And so I was like, oh, this is exactly what I need. So I built out my little query in OData and it said, show me in OData. And then I just copied that out and I pasted that into my Power Automate script and I moved right on. It's great, wonderful.
I've used that too. It's very helpful.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how you used it, because I would say Power Automate's the only place I've needed that kind of data, but it's a wonderful tool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Power Automate's the only place I've used it for like the query parameters and stuff.
Actually, what other tools?
I was just going to say, Liz, do you want to go first and kind of talk through some of the tools that you use with your clients?
Sure. I have a lot though. So let's see. I'm trying to pick like which one's my favorite. So the one I've used most recently, because I'm in the middle of a bunch of config, is the attribute factory. And so if you have a bunch of fields to create on an entity, you don't have to create them one at a time. You can just put them in a spreadsheet and import them. And it can be to multiple entities at a time too. So if you have, more than just a handful of fields to add, that is a huge, huge time saver.
So that'd be columns on tables for those of you just tuning in.
Fine. Thanks for updating my terminology, Merlin.
Keeping you relevant.
Have either of you used that one?
I haven't.
No.
I also haven't done like a mass implementation, I would say, that needed that many fields at one time, columns, Merlin.
Columns on tables.
Columns on tables.
And choices, not option sets.
So weird.
I know. Okay, so my next one is the user settings utility. And so that lets you preset personal settings. So you know how you, as an individual, you have system settings that apply to everyone, but you have your individual personal settings that you get through the gear. And so things like that are like your default like homepage, the number of records per page, like that defaults to 50. And like I always like to bump that up to 250. The advanced find mode defaults to simple, and I like to have that for detailed for anyone that's going to be using advanced find. And so like if you don't use the XrmToolBox, there's no way that you can control those settings for the people. Like you have to show them like, here, go change these things. But with the user settings utility, you can just go in, pick your users, and preset all those personal options. And there's all of them in there. Like those are just the ones I almost always change by default for every implementation. And I just think that makes the user experience a lot better from like day one.
Is it everybody, or can you do in like one by one? Because like somebody might need something different.
You can do one by one.
Oh, okay.
Like you pick the user or all the users or some of the users, and then you change the settings.
Yeah, because that could be helpful if you're sending emails out of Dynamics and somebody needs to be able to send an email on behalf of somebody else.
Mm-hmm. That settings in there.
Run that into that issue a lot. And then you have to like sit everyone on a call and talk through it. So.
Yep. You want me to keep going?
I can bring up one that I think not a lot of people actually know about or use a lot, because every time I talk about it, everyone's like kind of like, oh, how would I use that? So I use one that checks, I don't know what the name of it is because I just go in there and it's like the top one that I use, but it basically checks your, to make sure that all of your things are, it's like a solution checker, what is not in the, like the target environment that you're going into, because you might get a failure when you're trying to import, especially with managed solutions, this happens. You might need to include other things in your solution that are requirements. So it basically checks your solution for all of the necessary things. And that has been a lifesaver, especially since I have adopted a system, right? I'm not the only person who's ever worked on mine. So I don't know what the solution management was like before me. And I'm finding out that it probably wasn't great, since I have a lot of missing things and have to like add all these odd things into my solutions to move them. So that one has been a huge lifesaver and time saver.
I've not used that one, but I could see the value, definitely.
Isn't the system supposed to do that out of the box? Show you dependencies?
This is better, right? Actually,
yeah. So it does tell you. So like when you like out of the box, it does say like, hey, you're missing some dependencies, but it doesn't tell you like specifically what. So like in this solution checker, I really should have checked the name of it. It tells you like if it's a view, is it a chart, is it a form, is it a column? It tells you exactly what it is and what it's called. So it lays it all out there for you, where I think the error message that you get from Microsoft just says you have dependency misses maybe related to this table.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah.
Cool.
I also like any of the ones where you can update like or do like the custom views. I have salespeople who have, and I mean at every company I worked at, create their own like views, and then they're like, oh, this isn't pulling in. How do I get it to pull in? And you have no idea like how their view is built, or you have to jump on a screen share. So I use that to like share the view with me, and then I fix it, and then I send it back and I take it out of my view. Or if somebody leaves and you don't know what custom stuff they created that you're going to need for like a dashboard, you can go in there and check to see what they've created for themselves. So I really like that, the view, and you can do that with charts and dashboards as well. It's not just views, but the views is where I found it to be the most helpful.
That was the next one on my list. Yeah, so that's called the Personal Artifact Manager. Yeah, and I love that one too. It's all the personal stuff. So like views, charts, dashboards, and you don't have access to them otherwise. So you have access like as an admin to all that personal stuff, which is handy.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's handy.
And since we're on views, the view topic, I like the view layout replicator. So I like to try to keep my like views fairly consistent. Like obviously the type of the view or the filter criteria of the view, you might have a few different columns, but for the most part, like you're showing the same kind of core columns on all the views for an entity or table. And so instead of manually updating each view one by one, you can just copy one layout to another or to all of them. And so I've found that saves a ton of configuration time too. That's the view layout replicator.
Awesome.
Sounds more relevant in a new implementation, but I could see that also if you're like deploying some new set of tables that you might need to do that.
Well, I could see as a help, like walking into an environment and maybe somebody didn't do that.
Yeah, true.
So then you want to fix what's currently there. That could be really helpful. I did not know that was there and changed them all manually. So that would have saved a lot of time.
Now you know. If you ever need to redo those views or you're deploying new functionality.
Yeah. So one that I think is really like, I haven't used it, but in like the research that I did for this, kind of like Marilyn did, there's one called like the user audit viewer, where you can see what people are, when they're logging into the system, how long they were in, what they actually looked at. Cause I know that we have access to like the
view data now.
I was just going to say CDS, but it's not CDS anymore. Dataverse. You can see like what they're like, how many they've updated, tell you like when they last logged in or what they actually looked at. And I've had so many sales managers ask for that kind of stuff. Not as like a big brother thing, but like, are they using it the way that they're supposed to, rather than just opening it to like prove they logged in?
How is it different than like the org insights kind of analytics we get through the admin center? Do you know? Like, I'm assuming it has more functionality. You can get it, like export it somehow.
I'm guessing, yeah. So I think it comes into an export. I think that's probably the biggest difference and benefit. I have not used it yet. It's literally on my list to deploy over the weekend and start to spy on people in the system. But I think that that's like a good point. Like, even though you've used the XrmToolBox, there's so many tools in there that it's so hard to get through all of them or know what they all do.
Well, and there's new ones being added. Like they get enhanced, they get updated, and there's new ones added quite frequently.
Right.
So since we're talking, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead, Liz.
I was gonna say, since we're talking about like usage stuff, and like how people are using the system, and I think this is really helpful for current implementation. Like if you're already using the system, like this is a really good one to kind of like clean up your forms or like kind of do a health check. And that's the attribute usage. So you can run it on whatever tables you want, and it tells you which fields are being used. So it's like, how often are they being used? So do they have data or not in them? Are they required? Are they on the form? And then you can kind of reevaluate like what fields you have or columns you have on your forms, and clean them up that way with that data.
That's a great tool, especially for a system that's been around for like years and years and years. And somebody 5 years ago thought that these 3 fields were going to be critical. Nobody's ever put anything in them. Yeah.
I agree. That's also on my list. I found that one, or I know it's there, but it's one of those things where it's like, do you really want to find the results? Because then you have to make some changes. So I've always been really scared to use that one because I don't want to know that people are only using 10% of the fields.
So you're taking the ignorance is bliss approach.
100%. Depends on the day, but that's usually when there's so many things to do, like where does that fall on your list of things?
We can talk about that from a UI perspective then on our next podcast, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I was gonna say I'm just cringing at your user adoption stance there of la la la, see no evil.
That's you taking it way extreme in how I meant it. I might have exaggerated a bit.
Ashley, do you have more that you've used frequently or that you like?
Those are the ones I've used frequently. Like here, I know that they have the ribbon workbench.
That's another one.
Yep. So I've never used it, but other company like my partners have used it on my environment. I've always been scared to use it because I think it's above my.
It's not. It's so well. The simple stuff is really easy. You 100% could do it. If you can build a form, you can use it, or a model-driven app, you can use it. So like you can just remove, like hide buttons on the command bar or rearrange your command bar so that you're showing them just the things that apply. Now you can do like with code, you can do like conditional logic, like if X happens, then hide or show this button. So that I've not done personally. I've always asked a developer to do, but if it's simply just adding a button or rearranging things, that's really easy. It's like drag and drop.
So if you wanted to add a button, how difficult is that? Like
really easy, really easy.
Like,
yeah. So like I like to add buttons if like, let's say there's an on-demand workflow and you don't want them to have to go through like that 3-click step process. Just add a button that triggers that workflow. That's super easy to do.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And the ribbon workbench has been like a premium tool for years. Like that was, I remember using that in CRM 2011.
My one tip, yes, it's been around forever. My one tip is like, don't use a solution that has everything in it. Like build a solution with just the tables that you need. Because if you take like, let's say you add a solution with 50 tables in it and you only need to update 1 or 2 of them, it's going to take forever to load. So I like to have a separate solution just for command bar changes.
It's a good idea.
That's a really good tip.
Otherwise, I've had it like crash my computer before. It just takes, it's unreasonable the amount of time it takes to try to load like a full solution.
So I shouldn't try to load the default solution, you're saying?
No.
I think that's another good point is like if something doesn't work like the first time, don't get frustrated and stop. Like I know I've done that with the XrmToolBox. Like I pull it up and there's so many things in there. It's like, how are you ever going to know what they all do? But there are so many, I mean, like this podcast, obviously, but like there's so many resources out there, or just read the descriptions. Like I know, or just play with it in a sandbox. I've done that before. Like I'm so curious to see what this one does. I think I've done that with like the bulk data update. Like you can bulk update records, bulk deactivate, whatever. You can add a option to the field, whatever. And so that would take forever to do with like the bulk edit inside of Dynamics, but I mean, it can take hundreds of thousands of records and update them. Obviously, it takes time to run and it just runs in the background, but it's that has been a time saver before.
Which one are you talking about for the bulk update?
I think it's literally just called bulk update.
Okay, because I like to use, you know how like if you build a workflow, I think we're talking about like similar things but slightly different. Mm-hmm. You build a workflow, you can only run it like on the whole page, like 250 at a time. There's a bulk workflow execution where you can run a workflow on a view and it can process as many records as you want. So like it's similar where like if you need to do bulk updates, that can save you a ton of time too, where you don't have to go like page by page.
What I have noticed though, and I think this was a different conversation we had, but your computer does have to stay up and running in order for it to finish. If my computer went to sleep, that thing would die and kill, and then I'd have to start it all over. So
yeah, I mean, your computer can't shut off. Yeah,
and not even go to sleep. So
yeah,
I would have to leave it up, like plug it in and just say, don't go to sleep.
I feel like there's also a tool to cancel workflows. I feel like I learned this because some number of years ago, we had a consultant who accidentally like left a workflow on when like Scribe imported a bunch of data or something. And so then they had to go through and cancel all these workflows. And they like sat for hours, like most of a day, canceling like 6,000 workflows, like 250 at a time, just paging through. And then after they were done, they were like telling somebody else about how they had spent all this time doing this. And that person was like, pretty sure there's an XrmToolBox tool for that.
because I agree with you. I think it's in there because we had the same problem at a company that I worked at with like our emails. Like they would come in and it would stop our entire system because a workflow just couldn't like stop running. I think it was a geocode one where it would just go in a circle and it would stop our entire system. Like emails wouldn't come in. It was horrible. Emails wouldn't go out. And so our partner would use that to go in and just cancel everything.
I feel like that's the answer to a lot of tedious manual things. Be like, did you know there was an XrmToolBox utility that could do that?
I don't think I could have like enough quarters in the world to like, for how many times I've heard that. Like, oh, just go into the XrmToolBox and find something.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the takeaway, folks. If you have a tedious task that you need to do in your Dynamics or Dataverse environment, check the XrmToolBox first before you spend hours on that tedious task.
Or ask a friend too. I think that Marlon, your story or like where I was told in the beginning that I was scared to use it, you know, like I could have just asked Liz and been like, hey, can you spend 5 minutes, show me how to set this up? And then, you know, don't be nervous or scared of it.
It's true. All right. Last favorite tool, Liz.
I need to do 2. They'll be fast.
You can take mine, Liz. Take mine.
So if you ever need kind of like an ERD, so an entity relationship diagram or like the documentation, you don't need to do it by hand. Like there's a metadata document generator where it'll just like spit it out into like different formats like Excel or Word from a documentation perspective. And then my last favorite one is we are so used to when you delete something in the system that it's gone forever. Well, if auditing is turned on for that table, you can recover deleted data through the XrmToolBox, and it's called the recycle bin.
That's
I had
cool.
no idea that was there.
But auditing has to be turned on, otherwise it doesn't work. But it's pretty awesome, and I've definitely used it when a user's like, hey, I didn't mean to delete these records. And it's like, oh, no problem. I can recover those for you.
Nice.
Instead of being like, yeah, sorry, they're gone.
Liz, did you talk about the attribute bulk updater? Like if like, I always think of this like when you walk into an organization or an environment that has new as like the prefix on all of your options, or if you need like a yes, no field, but it needs to be required and you don't think about that. And then you can't require it because it's going to be, you know, it's going to be answered whether it's yes or no. And you can't change, like right now you'd have to go in and delete it and then recreate it. So, but
you can't change the field type normally.
Right.
Yeah.
But the attribute bulk updater allows you to do that. So you can change the schema name, you can change the type of field or column that it is, so that it fits your needs. So you don't have to go in and delete, because that can sometimes cause issues, especially with Dynamics marketing. I know it does.
Yeah. Like you don't want to really replace a field that's in use. Like it's fine if you haven't gone live yet, but still you have to untangle all the dependencies, which sucks. So yeah, no, that's a great utility. I'm glad you brought it up. That can also save a ton of pain and time, not having to manually, fix that in the system.
Indeed. All right. Sorry, I hate to cut you both off, but I think we're at time for today. Thanks everybody for listening, and download the XrmToolBox.
And I'm sure we'll have a link in the show notes.
Absolutely.
Definitely. Thank you for listening to the Dynamics Hot Dish podcast. For additional content and previous episodes, check out our website at dynamicshotdish.com, follow us on Twitter at DynamicsHotDish, and subscribe to our podcast for notifications. Thanks. See you next time.